The Iliad, Chapter 5. Pallas Athena now gave to Diomedes, Tydeus' son, the strength and courage that would make him shine among the Greeks and win him glory. Starlight flowed from his helmet and shield, as if Sirius had just risen from the sea, before dawn in autumn, and that brightest of stars was blazing from his torso and face instead of from the sky. Athena aimed him to where the battle was thickest. There was a Trojan named Dares, a rich man without a blemish on him, and a priest of Hephaestus. He had two sons, Phegeus and Idaeus, trained warriors. These two now separated themselves from the crowd and went for Diomedes, they in their chariot, he on foot. When they closed, Phegeus threw. His spear sailed high, passing well over the left shoulder of Diomedes, who kept on coming, launching a shot that hit Phegeus' chest between his nipples and knocked him from his rig. Idaeus jumped for it, abandoning his chariot and his slain brother, whose prostrate corpse he did not have the courage to defend. He himself would not have escaped Black Death if Hephaestus had not got him out of there, wrapping him in night, so that the old man, his priest, would not be utterly bereaved. Diomedes did get to the horses, though, and had his men drive them back to the ships. When the Trojans saw Dares' two sons, one in flight, the other dead by his chariot, their hearts shriveled. Athena's cold gray eyes bored in on Ares. She took his hand and said, "Ares, you bloodthirsty marauder, why don't we let the Greeks and Trojans fight, and see to which side Father Zeus gives glory? We'd both best withdraw and avoid his anger." And with that she led Ares away from the battle, and made him sit on the Scamander's sandy banks, while the Greeks pushed the Trojans back. Each leader took out his man. First, the warlord Agamemnon knocked Odysseus, the Halizones' commander, out of this chariot as he led the retreat, planting a spear between his shoulder blades and driving it out through his chest. He fell with a thud, and his armor clanged on his body. Idomeneus killed Festus, the Maeonian, who had come from Tarne's black soil, threading his spear through his right shoulder as he tried to mount his chariot, but instead fell back from it into the loathsome dark. Idomeneus' squires stripped off his armor. Menelaus killed Scamandrius. This man had been taught to hunt by Artemis herself, and could shoot any animal the mountain forest nourished. But neither the goddess nor all his old skill in archery could help him now. Menelaus planted a spear between his shoulder blades and drove it out through his chest. He fell with a thud, and his armor clanged on his body. Meriones killed Pheroclus, whose father was Tecton, and grandfather Harmon, and who was himself a skilled craftsman. For Pallas Athena loved him prodigiously. He could build all sorts of intricate things, and had built for Paris the doomed halls, that first spelled evil for Troy, and for himself, since he had no inkling of the gods' oracles. Meriones ran him down from behind and hit him in the right buttock. The spear point slid beneath the bone, clear through the bladder. He fell to his knees and groaned as death took him. Meges took out Pedaeus, Antenor's son. Though he was a bastard, Theano raised him as one of her own, to please her husband. Now Meges got close enough to him to send his spear through the tendon at the back of his neck and on into his mouth, cutting away the tongue at the root. He fell into the dust, his teeth clenched on cold bronze. Eurypylus got Hypsenor, son of Dolopion, and honored priest of the river Scamander. Euaemon's glorious son Eurypylus caught up with him as he sprinted away, and without breaking stride, slashed at the man's shoulder with his sword, and lopped off his arm, which fell in a bloody mass to the ground. Death covered his eyes with a purple haze. This was their labor in the crush of battle. As for Diomedes, you could not tell which side he belonged to, Greek or Trojan, as he boiled across the plain. A winter torrent will sweep away the thick-set riprap, meant to contain it, and flood over also the vineyard walls, when the rain of Zeus makes its swollen waters suddenly rise, and obliterate many fine works. So too before Tydeus' son were driven thick Trojan battalions. Many as they were, they could not withstand this single human tide. When Pandarus saw him storming across the plain and driving entire battalions before him, he bent his curved bow, and taking aim at Diomedes, hit him on the fly in the right shoulder, the arrow piercing the corselet plate, and spattering it with blood as it punched through. And Pandarus whooped, "Got him! Take heart, Trojan horsemen! The best of the Achaeans is hit! I don't think he will hold up long under that stiff shaft if Apollo in truth sent me forth from Lycia." Half prayer, half boast. But the arrow didn't kill him. Diomedes took cover next to his horses and car, and, still standing, said to Sthenelus, his driver, "Son of Capaneus, get down from the car and pull this arrow out of my shoulder." Sthenelus vaulted down to the ground, steadied himself, and drew the arrow, clean through his shoulder and out the other side. Blood spurted through the linked tunic, and Diomedes, good at the war shout, prayed, "Hear me, daughter of Zeus. If ever you stood by my father's side, a friend in the heat of battle, stand by me now, goddess Athena. Deliver unto me, and place within the range of my spear the man who hit me, before I saw him, and boasted I would not see for long the brilliant light of Helios the sun." Pallas Athena heard Diomedes' prayer. She made his body lithe and light, then feathered these words into his ear. "Go after the Trojans for all your worth, Diomedes. I have put into your heart your father's heroic temper, the fearless fighting spirit of Tydeus the horseman, Tydeus the shield, and I have removed the mist that has clouded your eyes, so that now you can tell God from man. Do not fight with any immortal who might come and challenge you, except Aphrodite, daughter of Zeus. If she comes, you may wound her with bronze." With these words, the gray-eyed one was gone, and Diomedes returned to the front. He had been eager before to fight the Trojans, but now his fury was tripled. A shepherd ivowns a lion as he leaps a pen's wall, but far from being weakened, the lion gains in strength, and the unprotected flock is little more than a pile of bloody fleece, before the angered lion leaps out again. So too Diomedes among the Trojans, killing next Astynus and Hypeiron, one with a spear cast above his nipple, the other with a sword stroke to the collarbone, shearing off the entire shoulder from the neck and back. He let them lie, and went after Abas and Polyidus, sons of old Eurydamas, who read dreams, but read no dreams for them when they left home. Diomedes cut them down and moved on. There were two more brothers, Xanthus and Thoon, sons of Phaenops, who loved them well. He was worn out with old age and its miseries, and had no other son to be his heir. Diomedes killed them too, taking their lives and leaving for the father sorrow and grief. They would not live to be welcomed home, and others would divide their inheritance. His next victims were two sons of Priam, Echamon and Chromius, in one chariot. Diomedes jumped on them, as a lion leaps on a heifer grazing peacefully in a woodland pasture, and breaks her neck. It was a brutal dismount the son of Tydeus forced them to make. He then stripped their armor, and his men drove their horses back to the ships. Aeneas saw him wrecking the Trojan ranks, and made his way through the busy spears, searching for Pandarus. When he found him, looking like the match for a god that he was, he went up to him and had this to say: Pandarus, where are your arrows and bow and your fame? No one here or in all Lycia can compete with you or claim to be better. Say a prayer to Zeus and take a shot at this man, whoever he is, who is beating the daylights out of the Trojans, some of our best, too. It could be he's a god, angry with the Trojans over some sacrifice. That would be tough. Lycaon's splendid son came back with this. Aeneas, he looks like Diomedes to me. His shield, his grooved helmet, his horses. I'm not at all sure that he's not a god, but if he is who I think he is, Tydeus' son, he's not fighting like this without some god standing at his side and cloaked in mist. I swear one of the immortals turned aside an arrow I already shot at him. Just as it struck, it wound up hitting him in the right shoulder, clean through his breastplate. I thought I had sent him down to Hades, but I didn't get him. Some god is sure angry. Anyway, I don't have a chariot now, or horses to pull it. Not that there aren't 11 beautiful new chariots back in Lycaon's palace, covered with cloths and a yoke of horses beside each one eating white barley and spelt. Yes, and Lycaon, the old spearman, told me as I left to go to war mounted, advice I should have taken but didn't, sparing the horses because I was afraid that in an army this big they would lack feed, and they had been used to eating all they wanted. So I left them, and I came to Ilion on foot, trusting my bow for all the good it has done. I've taken shots at two of their best, Diomedes and Menelaus, and hit them both, drew blood for sure, and only made them madder. Curse the day I took my bow from its peg and led my Trojan troops to lovely Ilion as a favor to Hector. If I ever return and see my land, my wife, and my high-roofed home, may my throat be cut by a thief in the night if I fail to smash my bow in pieces and throw it in the fire. It's been a piece of junk. And Aeneas, the Trojan commander, replied, "Don't talk like that. Things won't get any better until you and I take a chariot and face him in combat. Come on, get in mine, and you'll see what the horses of Tros can do. They know how to eat up the plain, and how to cut and turn, in pursuit or flight, and they will get us back to the city in safety, if Zeus gives Diomedes the glory again. Get in and take the lash and the reins, and I'll dismount to fight, or you take him on, and leave the horses to me." Lycaon's splendid son came back with this. "Keep the reins, Aeneas, and drive your own horses. They will pull better for a driver they know, in case we have to run from the son of Tydeus. I wouldn't want them to be spooked and shy from pulling us out, because they miss your voice, not with Diomedes all over us. He'd kill us both and make off with your horses. No, you drive them, and I'll meet his charge with my spear." So they mounted the chariot and drove off, full speed ahead toward the son of Tydeus. Sthenelus saw them coming, and said to Diomedes, "Here comes a duo now with muscle to spare, and hot to fight you. One is good with a bow, Pandarus, who boasts he is Lycaon's son. The other is Aeneas, who says his mother is Aphrodite, and Anchises his father. Let's retreat in the chariot. Calm down and get you out of action, or you'll get yourself killed." Diomedes looked up and down and said, "Don't talk to me about retreating, Sthenelus. It's not in me to dodge a fight. Besides, I still have my strength. I'm not even going to get in the chariot, much less retreat in it. I'll take them on just like this. Pallas Athena won't let me back down. As for these two, their horses won't be carrying them both away, even if one of them manages to escape. And one thing more, Athena has many plans, but if she does give me the glory here, and I kill them both, hold our horses on this spot, tying the reins to the chariot rail, and rush Aeneas' horses. Drive them back away from the Trojans and to the Greek lines. These horses come from the stock that Zeus gave to Tros as payment for his son Ganymede, the finest horses under the sun. Anchises stole some of the breed from Laomedon by secretly putting his mares to them, and so got 6 colts born in his own palace. 4 he kept for himself and reared at the stall, and 2 he gave to Aeneas, superb war horses. If we could take these, it'd be a real coup. Thus Diomedes and his driver, their 2 opponents, drove their thoroughbreds hard, and quickly closed the gap. And Pandarus, Lycaon's splendid son, called out, "You're tough, Diomedes, a real pedigreed hero, so I only stung you with that arrow. Well, let's see what I can do with a spear." The shaft cast a long shadow as it left his hand, and hit Diomedes' shield. The bronze apex sheared through and stopped just short of his breastplate. Pandarus, thinking he had hit him, whooped again. "Got you right through the belly, didn't I? You're done for, and you've handed me the glory." Diomedes answered him levelly. "You didn't even come close, but I swear one of you 2 goes down now and gluts Ares with his blood." His javelin followed his voice, and Athena guided it to where the nose joins the eye sockets. The bronze crunched through the pearly teeth and sheared the tongue at its root, exiting at the base of the chin. Pandarus fell from the car, his armor scattering the hard light as it clattered on his fallen body. His horses shied, quick movement of hooves as his soul seeped out into the sand. Aeneas vaulted down with his shield and spear, afraid that the Greeks might drag the body away. He straddled it like a lion, sure of its strength, spear straight out, crouched behind his shield's disk, only too glad to kill whoever stood up to him, his mouth open in a battle howl. But Tydeus' son levered up in one hand a slab of stone, much too large for 2 men to lift, as men are now, lifted it, and smashed it into Aeneas' hip, where the thigh bone turns in the socket that medics call the cup. The rough stone shattered the joint and severed both tendons, ripping open the skin. The hero sank to his knees, clenching the dirt with one hand, while midnight settled upon both his eyes. That would have been the end of Aeneas, but his mother Aphrodite, Zeus's daughter, who bore Aeneas to Anchises, the oxherd, had all this in sharp focus. Her milk-white arms circled around him, and she enfolded him in her radiant robe to prevent the Greeks from killing him with a spear to the chest. As she was carrying him out of the battle, Sthenelus remembered the instructions Diomedes had given him. He held his own horses away from the boiling dust, tying the reins to the chariot rail, and, on foot, stampeded Aeneas' beautiful horses towards the Greek lines, giving them to Deipylus, the boyhood friend he valued the most, and whose mind was like his, to drive back to the ships. Then he mounted his own chariot, took the glossy reins in hand, and drove his heavy-hooved horses off to find Tydeus' son, who was himself in armed pursuit of Aphrodite. Diomedes knew this was a weakling goddess, not one of those who control human warfare, no Athena, no Enyo here who demolishes cities. And when he caught up to her in the melee, he pounced at her with his spear, and, thrusting, nicked her on the delicate wrist, the blade piercing her skin through the ambrosial robe that the Graces themselves had made for her. The cut was just above the palm, and the goddess's immortal blood oozed out, or rather the ichor that flows in the blessed gods' veins, who, eating no bread and drinking no wine, are bloodless, and therefore deathless as well. The goddess shrieked and let her son fall, and Phoebus Apollo gathered him up in an indigo cloud to keep the Greeks from killing him with a spear to the chest. And Diomedes, yelling above the battle noise, "Get out of the war, daughter of Zeus! Don't you have enough to do distracting weak women? Keep meddling in war and you'll learn to shiver when it's even mentioned." The goddess, in extreme distress now, went off in a daze. Wind-footed Iris took her and led her through the throng, throbbing with pain, her pale skin bruised. After a while she found Ares, sitting on the left of the battle, his spear propped against a bank of mist, his horses standing by. Aphrodite fell to her knees and begged her brother for his gold front-lidded horses. "Brother dear, lend me your horses and help me get to Olympus. I'm hurt, wounded by a mortal, Diomedes, who would fight even Father Zeus." Ares gave her the gold front-lidded horses. She mounted the chariot gingerly, and Iris stepped in and took the reins. She cracked the whip and the team flew off, and came in no time to steep Olympus, the gods' homestead. Iris, in a blur of windy light, halted the team, unyoked them, and cast before them their ambrosial fodder. Aphrodite went in to her mother, Dione, and fell in her lap. And Dione, cradling her daughter in her arms, and stroking her with her hand, said, "Oh, my poor baby, who did this to you, to treat you like this? What did you do?" And Aphrodite, the goddess who loved to smile, "Tydeus' son wounded me, that bully, Diomedes, because I was carrying my son out of range, Aeneas, who is my dearest. The war has gone far beyond Trojans and Greeks. The Greeks are fighting the immortal gods." Dione answered in her lustrous voice, "You must bear it, my child. I know it hurts. Many of us Olympians have suffered harm from men, giving tit for tat to each other. Ares did, when Otis and Ephialtes, those bullies, sons of Aloeus, tied him up in a bronze jar for 13 months. They would have destroyed the god of war if their stepmother, beautiful Ireboa, hadn't told Hermes. He got Ares out, but the painful bonds had about done him in. Hera suffered too, when Heracles shot her right in the breast with a triple-pronged arrow, and there was no helping the pain she had then. Hades, too, formidable as he is, had to endure an arrow the same man shot him with, among the dead in Pylos, making him suffer. He went to the house of Zeus on Olympus, in agony, pierced with pain. The arrow had driven right through his shoulder. Paion rubbed on an anodyne and healed him, Hades being no mortal. Heracles was simply outrageous and reckless to provoke the Olympian gods with arrows, and now Athena has set this man upon you, this fool Diomedes, who doesn't understand that a man who fights with gods doesn't last long. His children won't sit on his lap calling him Papa, to welcome him home from the horrors of war. So as strong as he is, he had better watch out, or someone braver than you might fight him. And Igealea, Adrastus' heroic daughter, the wife of Diomedes, tamer of horses, will wake her family from sleep with lamenting her wedded husband, the best of the Achaeans." And with both her hands she wiped off the ichor. The wrist was healed, and the pain subsided. Athena and Hera were looking on and making snide remarks to provoke Zeus. The gray-eyed goddess opened up with this: "You won't get angry if I say something, will you, Father Zeus? The truth is this. Aphrodite has been urging some Greek lady to traipse after her beloved Trojans, and while she was stroking this gowned beauty, she scratched her frail little hand on a golden brooch." The fathers of gods and men smiled, and calling Aphrodite, said to her, "Dear child, war isn't your specialty, you know. You just take care of the pleasures of love, and leave the fighting to Ares and Athena." While these gods were talking to each other, Diomedes leapt upon Aeneas, even though he knew Apollo's hands were there above him. Great as Apollo was, Diomedes meant to kill the Trojan and strip off his armor. 3 times he leapt in homicidal frenzy. 3 times Apollo flicked his lacquered shield. But when he charged a 4th, last time, he heard a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once, and knew it was Apollo's voice, saying to him, "Think it over, son of Tydeus, and get back. Don't set your sights on the gods. Gods are to humans what humans are to crawling bugs. Even at this, Diomedes only backed up a little, just out of range of the wrathful god. And Apollo took Aeneas from the swarm up to his temple on sacred Pergamum. There Leto and arrowy Artemis healed him in the great sanctuary and made him glorious. And silver-bowed Apollo made a phantom to look like Aeneas, armor and all, and over this wraith the Greeks and Trojans battered each other with their rawhide shields, until the edges were tattered into leather fringe. Apollo then called out to the god of war. Ares, you bloodthirsty marauder, would you be so kind as to take this Diomedes out of action before he goes up against Zeus? He's already wounded Cyprus on the wrist, and came after me like a raging demon. Apollo then sat down on Pergamum's height, while Ares went to spur on the Trojans. Disguised as Achaeans, the Thracian commander, he called out to the well-born sons of Priam. You sons of Priam, a king bred by Zeus, how long will you allow your men to be killed by the Achaean forces? Perhaps until they are fighting right in front of our gates? Aeneas is down, son of noble Anchises, a man whom we honored as much as Hector. Let's save our comrade from the boiling dust. This caught their attention, and Sarpedon added his voice, scolding Hector sternly. Where was your will to fight gone, Hector? You used to say you could hold the city without any allies, just yourself, backed by your brothers and sisters as husbands. I don't see a single one of them now, who's not cringing like a dog before a lion. The only ones fighting are us, the allies. I'm only an ally myself, from a long way off. It's a long way to Lycia, by eddying Xanthus, where I left my dear wife and baby boy, and all my property and envied wealth, and yet I press my Lycians into battle, and take on my man, with nothing of mine here for the Achaeans to take or drive away. But you can't even be troubled to urge your men to take a stand and defend their own wives. Watch out you're not caught like flies in a web, an easy prey for your enemies, who will waste your populous city. You should be worrying about this day and night, and begging the captains of your gallant armies to hold their ground, or take the heat yourself. Sarpedon's speech cut Hector to the quick. He leapt to the ground with all his gears, and, brandishing a pair of sharp spears, roamed the ranks, urging everyone to fight. The noise intensified, and with a roar the Trojans whirled to face the Achaeans, who remained in tight formation and did not flinch. Wind carries chaff over the holy threshing floors when men are winnowing, and Demeter herself, blonde in the blowing wind, separates the grain from the chaff, and the piles of chaff that accumulate grow wider and wider. So too the Greeks under the cloud of white dust, their horses' hooves kicked up from the plain as the chariots wheeled into action again, and men locked up in hand-to-hand combat. The bronze sky paled. Ares, who was everywhere at once now, covered the battle with night to help the Trojans, honoring the request of sun-gold Apollo, who had asked him to rouse the Trojans' spirit when he saw that Athena, who supported the Greeks, had gone off. Apollo chose this moment to send forth Aeneas from his rich sanctuary, infused with strength. Aeneas took his place in the ranks. The men were glad to see him come back to join them, alive and well and in good fighting form. But they did not have time to question him, busy as they were with what Apollo was doing with the help of Ares and ravenous strife. The Greeks were rallied by the two Ajaxes, along with Odysseus and Diomedes, not that they quailed before the Trojan attack. In still weather, when the winds that usually scatter the shadowy clouds are asleep, huge banks of mist lie absolutely steady, where Zeus has set them on the mountain tops. The Greeks met the Trojans without a tremor, Agamemnon was ranged among them, commanding, "Be men, my friends, fight with valor, and with it a sense of shame before your comrades. You're less likely to be killed with a sense of shame. Running away never won glory or a fight." And with a quick throw of his spear, he hit one of Aeneas's men, Deicoon, son of Pergasus, whom the Trojans respected as much as Priam's sons, quick as he was to fight in the front lines. Agamemnon's spear hit his shield, which did not stop the bronze point from penetrating all the way through and into his belly, below his belt. He fell with a thud, and his armor clanged. When Aeneas killed two of Greece's best, Crethon and Orsilochus, the sons of Diocles, a man of substance who lived in Pherae, and was descended from the river Alpheus, whose broad stream flows through the Pylians' land, and who begot Ortilochus to rule over many. This Ortilochus was the son of Diocles, who had twin sons, Crethon and Orsilochus, highly trained warriors. They had just reached manhood when they went with the Argives on the black ships to Ilion, famed for its horses, to win recompense for the sons of Atreus. But death enfolded them both in that land. 2 cubs and a mother lion has reared in the mountains, where the woods are thick, will begin snatching cattle and sheep from human settlements, and continue ravaging the flock for years, until humans finally hunt them down. So these 2 brothers, beaten to the ground by Aeneas, they fell like tall fir trees, and as they fell, Menelaus pitied them. He strode through the foremost fighters, gleaming in his bronze and shaking 2 spears, spurred on by Ares, whose intention was that Menelaus go down at Aeneas' hands. But Antilochus, Nestor's son, saw him and strode through the front lines, afraid that if anything happened to Menelaus, the Greeks would be robbed of all their hard work. The 2 had just squared off, their spears pointed directly at each other, when Antilochus took his place right next to Menelaus, and Aeneas, quick as he was in battle, did not stay around when he saw the 2 of them standing their ground together. They pulled the dead brothers back to the Achaean lines, and put them in their comrades' arms, then returned to fight in the foremost ranks. Working as a team, they killed Pylaemenes, the great Paphlagonian commander, and Mydon, his charioteer. Menelaus put his spear through Pylaemenes' collarbone as he stood stock still. His squire Mydon was trying to turn the horses when Antilochus hit him with a stone on the elbow. The reins, white with ivory, fell from his hands to the ground, and Antilochus jumped him, driving his sword through his temple. He gasped and pitched forward, landing headfirst in the soft, deep sand, where he stuck up to his shoulders, feet upright, and held that position for some time until his horses knocked him over with their hooves. Antilochus drove them back toward the camp. Hector saw all this from across the ranks, and charged them with a shout. Trojans poured after him in force, led by Ares and Enyo in her power, who held in her hands the deafening, shameless horror of war. Ares cradled an enormous spear in his hands, and fell in with Hector, moving ahead of him, or a pace or 2 behind. Diomedes stopped dead in his tracks when he saw him. A man crossing the great plains comes to a river, and is so startled when he sees the water churning to the sea that he takes a step backward. So Diomedes gave ground, and said to his men, "Well, my friends, we always thought Hector was a good man with a spear, a real fighter. It turns out a god is always at his side. Ares, right now, disguised as a mortal. Keep your face toward the enemy and back up steadily. Don't be too eager to fight with gods." Thus Diomedes and the Trojans closed in. Hector killed 2 men, good fighters, Menestheus and Anchialus riding together. As they fell, big Ajax pitied them, and came to stand close by. He threw his shining spear and hit Amphius, son of Selagus, a man from Pasus who had rich farms there, but fate led him to come to the aid of Priam and his sons. Ajax's tree of a spear hit him in the belly, going right through the belt. He fell heavily, and Ajax rushed up to strip his armor, but was met with a hail of Trojan missiles, gleaming in the air, many of which he collected on his shield. Still, big Ajax planted his heel upon the corpse and pulled out his bronze spear. He was not able, though, to get the armor unstrapped, pressed as he was by the spears, and fearing a pincer movement by the numerous and now confident Trojans. Big as Ajax was, they pushed him back, and he staggered as he gave ground. While these struggles were going on, fate aroused Tlepolemus, a son of Heracles, tall and handsome, to go up against godlike Sarpedon. When these two were in range of each other, son and grandson of Zeus in the clouds, it was Tlepolemus who was first to speak. "Well, well, Sarpedon the Lycian, what are you doing skulking around here? You wouldn't know what to do in a fight. They lie when they say you're a son of Zeus. You don't even come close to the heroes who were born from Zeus in the old days, like my father, lion-hearted Heracles, who came here once for Laomedon's mares, with only 6 ships and a few men, but sacked Troy and emptied her streets. You have a coward's heart, and your race is dying. Your coming from Lycia is not going to help the men of Troy. I don't care how strong you are. You're going through Hades' gate, beaten by me." And Sarpedon, the Lycian commander. "Tlepolemus, your father sacked Ilion because Laomedon was foolish enough to deride the man who had helped him, and withhold the horses he had come so far to get. As for you, I'm going to work out a bloody death for you. You're going to give glory to me, and your soul to Hades." Sarpedon spoke, and Tlepolemus lifted his ashwood spear. They both cast at once, and the spears crossed in flight. Sarpedon's hit Tlepolemus full in the neck. The point passed completely and painfully through, and ebony night enfolded his eyes. Tlepolemus' spear hit Sarpedon's left thigh. The point slashed through with a vengeance and grazed the bone, but his father saved him, for now. Sarpedon's men carried him out of battle, the long spear trailing heavily. In their haste, no one noticed it or thought to draw it out, which would have allowed him to use his legs. It was difficult work tending him at all. On the other side, the Greeks bore Tlepolemus away from the fighting. Odysseus saw all this and longed for action. He debated inwardly whether he should pursue the son of thundering Zeus, or take instead many Lycian lives. It was not Odysseus' fate to kill Sarpedon, so Athena focused his mind on the Lycians. He filled Coronanus, Alastor, and Chromius, Alcandrus, Helios, Noemon, and Pyrantus, and he would have killed more, but Hector was quick to see what was going on, and strode through the foremost fighters, helmet shining above his flaming bronze, bringing terror to the Greeks, and joy to Sarpedon, who groaned as he spoke. "Son of Priam, don't let me die here, as prey for the Greeks. Help me. If I must die, let me die in your city, since I will never return to my own land to make glad my wife and infant son." Hector did not waste any time answering, but sprinted past, helmet glancing in light, in his passion to drive the Argives back and kill as many of them as he could. And godlike Sarpedon was made to sit beneath the beautiful oak, sacred to Zeus, and Pelagon, his comrade, pulled the spear out of his thigh. His spirit left him, and a mist poured down over his eyes. Then the north wind blew upon him, and he breathed again, though he had gasped out his soul. Under pressure from Ares and Hector, the Greeks neither turned and made for their ships, nor held their own in the fight, but eased themselves backward, now that they knew the Trojans had Ares. The killing began with certain Greeks, distinguished as Hector's and Ares' victims, godlike Teuthras, Orestes, a horse driver, Oenomaus and Trichus, Aetolian spearmen, Helenus, son of Onops, and Oresbius, a prosperous Boeotian with a gilded corselet. The havoc continued, and when Hera noticed that the Greeks were being crushed in battle, her words flew fast to Pallas Athena. "This is a disaster, daughter of Zeus. Our word to Menelaus that he would go home with Troy demolished will come to nothing if we allow Ares to rage on like this. Come, it's time we remembered how to fight." Athena, the gray-eyed goddess, agreed, and Hera, queen of heaven, daughter of Cronus, got busy harnessing the horses, gold-frontleted, while Hebe slid the bronze, 8-spoked wheels onto the car's iron axle, wheels with pure gold rims, fitted with bronze tires, a stunning sight, and the hubs spinning on both sides were silver. The car's body was made of gold and silver straps, stretched tight, and had a double railing. From it projected a silver pole, and at its end Hebe bound the golden yoke, and on that she sung, and hung the golden harness. Hera led the quick-hooved horses, beneath the yoke, her heart pounding for war. Athena, meanwhile, Zeus's favorite daughter, let her supple robe slip down to her father's floor, this embroidered garment her own handiwork. She put on one of cloudy Zeus's tunics and strapped on her armor. Around her shoulders she flung the tasseled aegis, bordered with rout, and inset with the blood-chilling horrors of war, in the center of which was a Gorgon's head, the dread insignia of Zeus, aegis holder. On her head she put a gold helmet, knobbed and horned, and embossed with 100 cities' soldiery. She stepped into the blazing chariot, cradling a spear, long and thick enough for heaven's daughter, to level battalions of heroes in her wrath. Hera quickly flicked the horses with the lash, and the automatic gates of heaven groaned open, as willed by the Hours, who control access to Olympus and heaven, opening and shutting the dense cloud banks. Through this gate they drove the patient horses, and found Zeus sitting apart from the other gods, on the highest peak of ridged Olympus. White-armed Hera reined in the horses there, and put her questions to the Most High. "Father Zeus, doesn't Ares infuriate you with his reckless destruction of so many Greeks? Much to my sorrow, while Cyprus and Apollo, smug at their success, are lounging around with this mindless bully who knows no law. Father Zeus, will you be angry with me if I knock Ares silly and out of the battle?" And Zeus, clouds scudding around him. "Better to put Athena onto him. She's always been the best at giving him grief." White-armed Hera did not disobey. She lashed the horses and they flew with a will between the starry heavens and earth. One bound of the gods' horses takes them as far into the misty distance as a lookout can see over the wine-blue Aegean. When they came to Troy and to the confluence of the Scamander and Simwa rivers, the white-armed goddess reined in the horses, unyoked them, and shed a thick mist around them. Simois made ambrosia sprout up for them. The two goddesses, though passionate to come to the aid of the Greeks, stepped forward as quietly as doves. They were soon in the thick of things, where the army's elite, drawn to Diomedes' strength, clustered around him like huge animals, lions or razorback hogs that can rip a man apart. Hera took her stance there and transformed herself to look like Stentor, whose bronze voice sounds as loud as 50 voices combined. And she yelled, "For shame, Greeks! You're all show and no fight. When god like Achilles used to enter battle, the Trojans wouldn't so much as leave their gates out of fear for what his spear could do. Now they have backed us up against our ships." This got their fighting spirit up. Meanwhile, gray-eyed Athena flashed to Diomedes' side. She found that prince beside his horses and car, cooling the wound from Pandarus' arrow. The sweat where his broad shield strap rubbed was bothering him, and his arm was sore. He was lifting the strap and wiping off the dark, clotted blood when the goddess, casually grasping the horse's yoke, said to him, "You're not very much like your father, you know. Tydeus had a small build, but he was a fighter, even when I wouldn't allow him to fight or show his stuff, like the time he came to Thebes as a solo envoy to all those Cadmeans. I ordered him to keep his peace at the banquet, but he had a lot of heart, as he always had, and challenged the Cadmean youths and beat them all. Effortlessly. Of course I was there beside you, but you, I stand by you. I protect you. I tell you not to worry, to fight the Trojans, and here you are, either bone-tired or paralyzed with fear. No, you're no son of Tydeus or grandson of sharp-old Oeneus." And Diomedes, as tough as they come, answered, "I know it's you, goddess, daughter of Zeus, and so I will answer you frankly. No, I'm not paralyzed by fear, and I'm not slacking off. But I am following the orders you gave me when you told me not to fight face-to-face with any of the gods except Aphrodite. If she came, you said I could wound her with bronze. That's why I've withdrawn and given orders for all of the troops to fall back to this spot. I know that Ares is controlling the battle." And Athena, whose eyes were as gray as owls, "Diomedes, son of Tydeus, I do love you. You don't have to fear Ares or any other of the immortals. Look who is here beside you. Drive your horses directly at Ares, and when you're in range, strike. Don't be in awe of Ares. He's nothing but a shifty lout. He promised Hera and me he would fight against Troy and help the Greeks. Now he's turned Trojan and abandoned us." With that, she pulled Sthenelus back and pushed him off the chariot. Sthenelus went flying. And Athena got in next to Diomedes, who seemed to glow beside the eager goddess, and the solid oak axle groaned under the load of an awesome deity and a hero at his best. Pallas Athena handled the reins and whip, and drove the horses directly at Ares, who at that moment was stripping the armor from a warrior named Periphas, a huge man, Aetolia's finest and his father's glory. Ares was busy removing the dead man's armor and getting smeared with blood. Athena put on Hades' helmet so Ares couldn't see her, but Ares did see Diomedes, and when he did, he dropped Periphas to lie in his own gore, and headed straight for the hero. As soon as they were in range of each other, Ares leaned out over his horses' backs, and thrust, frantic for a kill. Athena's hand deflected the spear in mid-air, and sent it sailing harmlessly over Diomedes' chariot. And when Diomedes thrust next, she drove his spear home to the pit of Ares' belly, where the kilt piece covered it. The spearhead sliced right through to the flesh, and when Diomedes pulled it out, Ares yelled, so loud you would have thought 10,000 warriors had shouted at once. And the sound reverberated in the guts of Greeks and Trojans, as if Diomedes had struck not a god in armor, but a bronze gong 5 miles high. After a period of heat, when the low clouds are massed like wool, you will sometimes see a darker cloud of air whirling off, on its way to becoming a tornado. That is how Ares appeared to Diomedes, moving off through the clouds and up to the big sky. He quickly scaled the heights of Olympus, sat down sulking beside Cronion Zeus, showed him the immortal blood oozing from his wound, and whined these winged words. "Father Zeus, doesn't it infuriate you to see this violence? We gods get the worst of it from each other whenever we try to help out men. Why did you have to give birth to that madwoman, your marauding daughter who is always breaking the rules? All the rest of us gods, everyone on Olympus, listen to you, but she can say or do whatever she wants. You even urge her on, your gray-eyed girl. Just now she's been egging on Diomedes to rampage against the immortal gods. He wounded Cyprus first, got her on the wrist, then charged at me like an avenging spirit. My fast footwork saved me, or I would be lying in a heap of gruesome corpses, or barely alive from taking hits from his spear." And Zeus, from under thunderhead brows, "Shifty lout, don't sit here by me and whine. You're the most loathsome god on Olympus. You actually like fighting and war. You take after your hard-headed mother, Hera. I can barely control her either. One way or another, she got you into this. Be that as it may, I cannot tolerate your being in pain. Your mother did, after all, bear you to me. But if you were born to any other god, you'd be long buried in hell below the Titans." And he called Paion to doctor his wound. Paion rubbed on an anodyne to kill the pain, and then, as quickly as white milk, thickened with fig juice, curdles when stirred. Paion healed impetuous Ares, and Hebe bathed him and dressed him handsomely, and he sat beside Zeus, exulting in glory. Then back to the palace of great Zeus came Argive Hera and Athena the Protector, having stopped brutal Ares from butchering men.